Grab your treats, your coffee, take a seat. For those of you who are in here, okay, can everyone stand up? Can everyone just stand? We're going to get the blood flowing again. You got a little break. So, all right, everyone, if you're physically able, come on. We don't need any wah-wahs in here. Okay, we're going to do a little game. It's pretty simple and easy. Okay, again, the youth pastor's got to come out. So here's the game. I'm doing this as people walk in. So when my hands, have you ever played this? When my hands cross, you need to clap. Okay, some of you have played this. Okay, so let's practice. When they cross, you clap. Ready? Okay, we'll go slow. Speed it up a little bit. All right, so now we're going to play. When they cross, you clap. If you clap when they don't cross, you sit down. Okay, and I was just talking to Bill Bush. The winner, he said he'll buy you Apple AirPods with his own money. So, all right, ready? When I cross, you clap. And God is watching you. Don't cheat. Ready? Here we go. That was quick. That was like atomic bomb right there. Okay, so who's still in? Okay, so wow, 2 people? This is the quickest game I've ever played. Okay, ready, guys? All right, everyone watch them to make sure they're ready. Oh, that was delayed. You got to go quick. Ready? They're both out. I get the AirPods. All right, that was fun. So we're talking about the title of this next few minutes. This is on page 45, I believe. Crucial conversations. Specifically, how do we conquer crucial conversations before they conquer you? So what is a crucial conversation? In the book, Crucial Conversations, Joseph Granny, the authors, they define a crucial conversation as a discussion between 2 or more people when you have these 3 things at play. Okay, the stakes are high, so it's kind of a big deal. You have opposing opinions, right? I think one thing, you think the other, and strong emotions. So you really believe in this, okay? So high stakes, opposing opinions, strong emotions. Now, there's another word for this, just for fun. Can anyone guess what this kind of situation is? Marriage. It's marriage. For example, a few years ago, before kids, my wife Ashley and I, we lived in North Minneapolis. So we lived in the city, and we were going to go to church together on a Saturday night. Now, for those of you who are pastors, to get to just go and attend church with your spouse, that's like a blessing. It's a big deal. So we were going to go to church together, and we were going to go to our main Lino Lakes campus, which, if traffic is great, it's about a 40-minute drive. So this was Saturday, and I get all excited because the plan was we were going to go to church, and then after church, we were going to go to her parents' house, my in-laws, that are just, and I have the greatest in-laws in the world. I love them. I always joke with my wife, it's like, if I ever were to tell my wife you're just like your mother, it would be the highest compliment. My mother-in-law is like the best person in the world. She says that too. It would be just a compliment. So, and then we're going to eat food, and then back then they just got a brand new puppy, a yellow lab named Oakley. And I love dogs, like puppy breath, fantastic. So again, we're going to go to church. You know, we're going to have food. I get to play with a puppy. So we get in the car, we start driving to church, and of course we hit traffic because there was an accident that just happened. And we're waiting in traffic, and I'm looking at the clock, and I don't like being late. Does anyone, when you start to realize you're late, you start to just feel things? And especially, like Dale was saying, back then, when the countdown hit 0, the rocket ship took off. We got Leonard Skinner in your Freebird in your face or something, right? And I didn't want to miss the opener. And I'm looking, I'm like, shoot, we're going to be late. We're now going to be like a minute late. We're going to be 5 minutes late. We finally get through traffic. I'm already feeling a little frustrated. I'm now speeding. And we've been in the car for almost an hour. We're not even 5 minutes from church. And my wife, Ashley, looks at me and she says, "Did you remember to blow out the candle?" And I said, "No. Did you remember to blow out the candle?" And then she just looked at me. And women are powerful when they just look at you. She just looked she didn't say anything. And I knew, we've been married for 13 years. I knew exactly what she was going to say. She didn't say a word, and I just started arguing with her. I'm like, there is not a chance in this world I am turning this car around to drive all the way back home to blow out a candle that, somebody else forgot to blow out. Because blame always enhances relationships in those moments. And she just looked at me, and I could swear her eyes were like, "Are you really going to make me say it?" So I'm just, I'm like, "No, I don't want to do it." Well, finally, she just stared at me. I flipped the blinker on. I turn around. I drive back home, huffing and puffing the whole time. We finally, 40 minutes later, pull into our driveway, slam it into park, slam the car door, stomp into the house to blow out a candle that was never even lit in the first place. That's not the point of the story. Oh, man. Here's my point. 1 minute, we're casually driving down the freeway and life is looking good. I'm excited, she's excited, and then we hit a moment where these three things are at play. Stakes are high. House gonna burn down? Do we risk it? Opposing opinions, it's fine. We leave candles burning all the time for hours. It's fine. Nothing's going to happen, And strong emotions. Specifically, I'm almost embarrassed to admit, but my emotions were strong that day. The whole way home, I was kind of a jerk. Was not very nice, huffing and puffing, slamming doors, like this is so stupid. And I will admit to you that day when it came to my marriage, I completely blew it. Failed as a husband that day. And I later on had to apologize. I'm like, I don't know why I was just so frustrated and so angry about it. And unfortunately, I think when it comes to leaders, we often blow it when it comes to these crucial moments, don't we? It happens a lot. And if we want to be leaders who lead boldly and love each other at the same time, right? We want to lead boldly and love each other. We've got to get this right, because every crucial conversation we have, whether it's really, really big or even just a small one, every crucial conversation we have, it does one of two things. It either enhances your credibility as a leader, it enhances the trust that your team has with you, it enhances your influence and furthers the mission, or it hurts it. Every single one, it either enhances credibility or it hurts credibility, so we have to learn how to handle these really, really well. Okay, so we're going to dive right in, and we're going to learn how to master crucial conversations. We're going to ask 3 primary questions. Okay, so this is where if you want to take notes, I highly recommend. I'm going to give you a lot of content. Write these down. Rip this page off. Staple it at your desk, because this will be a very, very practical tool that you're going to need all the time. Okay, one of our executive leaders who oversees all of our campus pastors and everything, when it comes to this teaching, he came into my office afterwards and he was like, Aaron, as you were teaching this, I was thinking, as leaders, we need to be having crucial conversations all the time, because if you're not having crucial conversations, you're not leading. And that is true. So it's a huge part of leadership. It's the burden of leadership, so we have to do it. Do it well. The first question is, why should I address the issue? Why? Can I let it go? Can I ignore it? Can I just pray it goes away? Can I pray they go away? God, are you sure you're not calling them somewhere else? Why do I, the leader, have to be the one? I don't want to be the one. Someone else do it. Why does it have to be me? Well, I can think of three primary reasons. The first reason is for Christ's sake. Okay, I'm specifically wording this intentionally. I want you to say to yourself, for Christ's sake, have the conversation. Have the conversation for Christ's sake. Now, some of you are like, dude, you're swearing right now, okay? How dare you? What you could have said for the sake of Jesus. No, I want you to remember, have the conversation for Christ's sake. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. Okay, so in John chapter 17, Jesus prays for all of the believers. Okay, that's us. And check out what he prays for in verse 21. He says, I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one. As you are in me, Father, and I am in you, may they be in us, so that the world will believe that you've sent me. So, out of all the things Jesus could have prayed for the future believers, he prayed for oneness. He prayed for unity. That the world would know that God the Father sent Christ the Son into the world to save the world, redeem his people, offer forgiveness and life. And the way the world knows that is by how his followers are one with each other, how they are unified with each other. And when there is conflict within the church among believers and it's ignored, what does that do? Does it cause unity? It causes division. And now just think about our culture right now. Does our culture look at Christianity and the church and go, wow, look at how unified and one they are with each other? That is not our brand. And shame on us. And the reason it's not our brand is because we're terrible at having these. That's just one of the reasons. So when conflict is happening in our church, we have to handle it for Christ's sake, for the sake of the mission and the gospel of Jesus in this world. Okay, so for Christ's sake, have the conversation. The second reason we must address it is for their sake. Now, there is two different people. First, it's the person, right? It's the person that you need to have a crucial conversation with, because oftentimes they don't realize it. And the second there is the team or the group, whatever that looks like in your context, right? Whether it's in a small group or, your team, it's both. Because first, for the person, we have to point it out. It's biblical, right? So in Galatians 6, Paul says, dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, and it's not always sin, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but he says, you who are godly, you who are a spiritual leader, you should gently and humbly help that person back on the right path. So for their sake, if you love them, if you want what's best for them, you have to address it to help that person. Because sometimes they might not even realize it. And what they may not realize is that it's impacting their relationship with other people. Maybe it's impacting their relationship with God. It's impacting their potential, their capacity. So for their sake, if we love them, we have to point it out. And the second group is the team. Because here's what happens, and I think most of you guys will realize this. If you're on a team or you're in a group and there's something going on that requires a crucial conversation, who are you looking to do something about it? The leader. And if you're the leader and you're not doing anything about it, you're going to start losing credibility with everyone in the team because you're allowing this to happen and you don't have the courage to do something about it. And if you have great people on your team, high potential, high capacity people, they're not going to stay on your team very long because they don't want to be a part of a culture that just ignores and puts up with that stuff. And they're just going to fly out of your nest into someone else's team. So everyone's looking at you. Are you going to do something about it, leader? And if you do and you do it well, guess what happens? You just level up your credibility and your trust. And oftentimes you have people thanking you for dealing with it. The third reason why is for your sake. It's you. When I first came into leadership, I was dealing with a situation like this, and I was talking to my dad about it, and I remember a quote he said to me, and I'll never forget it. He's like, Aaron, here's what I've learned, after being a leader for many years. He said, you will lose more sleep over the crucial conversations you should have that you don't have than the ones you actually do have. Isn't that true? Now, maybe I'm the only weird one in here, but how often when we have to have a crucial conversation do we have those midnight imagination conversations? Right? Because when you know you should have it and you keep ignoring it, it keeps you up at night. You kind of get stressed about it, you're thinking about it, your anxiety rises, and then you're having this conversation with the person in your head. And does that false conversation in your head ever end well? Are they ever thanking you for calling them out? No. And pretty soon you see the person the next day and you're mad at them and you're just more resentful. And they didn't even do anything, right? So it's like if you ever want to sleep again, if you ever want to move on, if you ever want to conserve your energy to focus on what God wants you to be thinking about and focusing on and helping develop the good people, right? You can't ignore it for too long. You have to address it for your sake. Okay, so for Christ's sake, for the person, your team's sake, for their sake, and for your sake, we have to do this. It's the burden of leadership. The second question is, well, then what is the issue? Okay, what is the issue? Now, oftentimes when I teach this, I'll ask when you've been a part of a crucial conversation that doesn't go well, why? Right? What's missing? And there's a lot of factors there, but the number one response I always get is clarity. Right? So maybe you've had a crucial conversation with someone, maybe you've been the recipient of it, and oftentimes when they don't go well, the number one reason is the person isn't very clear on what the issue actually is, and then maybe you're not clear if you're the recipient of it, wait, so what is the problem exactly? So we have to be clear on what is the issue. Now, I think in a leadership, church leadership, most of these issues we're dealing with fall into one of 5 buckets. Okay, this isn't exhaustive again, but I think most of them fall into one of these. And the first one is competence. So for these crucial conversations, it's not a character thing, it's not a sin thing, it's just a competence thing. Maybe you have someone at your church who's really passionate about singing and worship, right? And then they want to be on the worship team, and they start singing on the worship team. And in your mind, you're like, if they keep singing on the worship team, we won't have a church anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's like they just learned how to play guitar last night. You know what I mean? And they're trying to figure it out, right? It's just that's over-exaggerated, but it's a competence thing. We've had to have ones where we'll have teachers, they're elementary school teachers, and they love kids, they love Jesus, they're incredible people, and then they want to start teaching in our kids' ministry, and then they start teaching in our kids' ministry, and again, it's Or it's there's things we need to talk about before you're ready to do that, right? It's just a skill, it's a competence thing. And those are not fun to have, but they require often crucial conversations. And we'll get into how you have them and how you have them well. So is it a competence thing? Or is it a chemistry thing? Now, chemistry, we could go on and on about examples, but simply put, chemistry is there something about their being, could be personality, could be how they operate within the team, that's just not quite, getting along with people. A few examples would be maybe you're the leader of the team and you do brainstorm sessions, right? It's like, all right, here's a problem. What does everyone think? And there's someone on the team who is always the first one to respond, and they always think their idea is the greatest idea in the world. And every time someone else has an idea, they just somehow argue with them, and kind of shut them up. Do you have these people, or is it just me? Right? Like it's a chemistry thing. They might not even be aware of it. They might just be really passionate about their idea. But what happens is if you ignore it, is everybody on the team feels it. They all see it. It annoys all of them. That person is actually losing credibility and respect by their team. And over time, when you say, what do you all think? Your team will eventually be silenced because they're just going to look to that person and let them just go on and on and on and not tell you the truth because they don't want to be interrupted or disagreed with. And then they're going to tell you the truth behind closed doors. It's a chemistry thing. For that person's sake and the whole team's sake, you got to have the crucial conversation. It could be just people are lack EQ. You share a story. Maybe they ask you, "Hey, how was your day?" And you're like, "Oh, my day was so good. I went to the mall with my kid or whatever." And then pretty soon, for the next 30 minutes, they're just talking about themselves, right? And you're like, "Wait a minute. I thought you asked." Right? It's a miss, and it's a chemistry thing. It requires a crucial conversation. The third could be character. Now this could be a sin, maybe a sin thing, a pattern of lying, a gossip, pride, arrogance, anger, disrespectful, appropriate comments. I remember in our student ministries once, I was being a guest speaker a few years ago, and then beforehand, there was this, meeting with all the production people, and there was this person there who just made this really off-color, inappropriate joke, and you could feel, everyone was like, "Oh, that dude, no," and it was a moment where it required a crucial conversation with that person. Now, in that specific instance, what I did is I went to the actual leader and said, "Hey, you saw that, right?" He's like, "Yep." He's like, "I'll follow up and have a crucial conversation with him." Because it needs to happen, because that person wasn't aware that just isn't allowed. And if you allow that to be a part of your culture, pretty soon people are going to be like, "I'm serving at church and there's like those weird jokes." Like that's not okay. So it just required a crucial conversation. Capacity is one. This is the hardest one. Now this is different than competence. So competence is here are some skill things that you have to work on. Right? Competence is a big part of your job is Excel. You got to work on Excel or get better in this area. You're a speaker, you're pretty good, but there's just ways you can get better. Capacity is when you as a leader are looking at your team and going, has the job outgrown their capacity? Now, a simple way to think about this is, let's say you're a church planter, right? You plant a church, and you have to lead like a church planter. And you have a small team. Maybe you have 50 people, 100 people. Now your church continues to grow. And it grows and it grows and it grows. Your capacity as a leader has to grow, or else your church will outgrow you. And you have to change how you lead. You can't lead a big church like you led a small church, or else you will become the lid for your church. But not only for yourself, but you also have to look at your team. So you have to look at your team and say, "Man, they were an incredible youth pastor that been with us for years, and the ministry's grown and grown and grown. But now it's like what they love and what they're gifted at and what they're passionate about is being the youth pastor to the youth. Now, what we need is a youth pastor who's really good at recruiting and developing and pouring into adult small group leaders who are like pastoring the youth. Right? So does this person have the capacity to lead in that way? Like, I'm actually working with a church right now that's working with their youth pastor who has met the lid, and they have him on a 360 review to be like, can he rise up to become this type of leader for the sake of our church? Right? And it's really, really hard to do, but you have to be aware of it. You always have to be evaluating your people, because what happens is if we keep people in a role that has outgrown their capacity, two things happen. Number one, that person eventually burns out, doesn't fully operate in their giftedness, right? Feels like they're always struggling and not succeeding, and so does like the ministry and the team. So for their sake, you might have to have a crucial conversation and find a different role for them. I had to lead through this when we went from a mobile site to our permanent site, because we had to go from like a couple hundred volunteers to like nearly 1,000 volunteers. And this specific pastor, our pastor of like serving at the time, the way God wired him was to see a need and do it. Right? So he would be there when we were mobile. He'd be the first one there. He would set up the whole lobby. He would always want to do. In his mind, he's like, leaders are the doers, right? The speed of the leader, the speed of the team, which worked when we were small. And eventually it was a lot of crucial conversations, right? In coaching conversations that were like, hey, here's the deal, man. Your job needs to be see something. Who do I find to recruit, develop, train to do the thing? That's how you grow and expand. And then when we were moving into the new campus, I just realized that is not how God gifted him. And we need a different leader in the role that can operate at a different capacity. Does this make sense? So what I did, I had a crucial conversation with him, and I found him a different seat on the bus. He became our facility manager. And he loved that, right? He got to serve people by doing it. But his lid was, your doing needs to be people, not task. But you have to be aware of those things. So the fifth one is culture. Culture is one that, maybe people are extremely gifted, very relational, high character, even high capacity, but you hire them from a different church, right? You hire them from the outside. They moved from northern Minnesota and now they're in Arizona, right? There's just every church, every team has a different culture to it, right? And when people enter that culture, sometimes they pet the cat backwards. Right? That's a classic Dale. Sorry to steal that from you, Dale. But it's like, come in, and it's like, that's not how we operate. And it requires a lot of crucial conversations. So we'll have communicators come in, and maybe they'll use language on the platform that we just don't use. They talk in a certain way and do things that we just don't do at Eaglebrook in our culture. Right? And all it requires is hey, here's a little crucial conversation, and I'm teaching them how we operate. Right? It's like, hey, I think of one example where we had a youth pastor who had a great idea. And what he did in our culture is he had the idea, and then he just did the idea, and he implemented and executed it at his campus. And that's just not how we operate. It's when you have an idea, we operate as a team. So it's like you go to your supervisor, you go to your central supervisor, and then we would have been like, yes, that's a great idea, pilot it. But his problem is a good idea executed the wrong way is a bad idea. So we had to teach him, like, in our culture, here's how you could have done that differently to succeed. So that if you have a great idea, again, do it this way here. So that just, again, we couldn't just ignore it. We had to teach him for his sake. So any questions so far? Okay, why Any questions on the what? If you do it, yeah. Out of five, which one's the hardest? Ah. So his question is, out of these five, which one, in my experience, is the easiest to like shift a person into, and which one is the hardest? Yeah, I would say most of the time culture is the easiest because it's a, hey, you're not really aware of this. This is just how we operate here. It's easier to, but sometimes, I don't know if there is one because sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes people have, maybe they have, remember our die for, defend, discuss? Sometimes people have certain defends or discusses that deep down is like a die for them. And that's pretty hard because it's like in our culture, that's not that big of a deal. Character is always hard because all of the other ones are here's feedback on what you're doing, and character can be this is who you are. And that can be really, really difficult. At the same time, oftentimes if it's a chemistry issue, a lot of things, it's like that's a symptom of a deeper issue, which could be character. So I don't know if there is an easy or a hardest. It's just they're all different, yeah. Difference between chemistry and culture? Yeah, I think chemistry is how are they relating, like relationally with the people around them and their team. Culture is, as an organization, here's how we operate and do things. Now, there can definitely be overlap, right? But I would say that, like, high level, that's the difference, Yeah, like when people started Eaglebrook, the vision culture, there's a lot of ingraining that into people. There's a lot of crucial conversations, like bringing people back to like, I know you're passionate about that, but that's not our mission. That's not what we do here. That's not how we operate here. That's not what we value here. So there's a lot of those types of conversations that happen, yeah.
When you try to have the capacity question with somebody, in my experience, that person doesn't understand that concept, right? And so you're showing the person a lid that they don't realize they have.
Yep.
Any recommendations or tips on how do you lovingly communicate that with someone when it's a capacity issue?
Yeah, so the next question is how, which we'll get to. But as you're asking that question, I'd say most of the time, by the time it gets to an actual capacity thing, it's probably started with a competence thing. And there have been probably a lot of like smaller crucial conversations and feedback and things to work on, maybe before it gets to like the big capacity part. But yeah, I think with capacity, I remember a quote when I first started at Eaglebrook. We had a campus pastor do like an all-staff training. And one of the things he said, I don't remember what his whole teaching was on, but one of the things he said was, if you don't keep growing as a leader, Eaglebrook Church will outgrow you. And that's powerful. So I think with capacity, the times I've had to have those, it's helping people see how God has really gifted them. Right? Because capacity doesn't mean one person is necessarily better than the other. It's as a leader, when you're looking at your staff and people, you should feel this responsibility of God is calling me to steward them well. And if someone is becoming a lid or leading in a role above their capacity, like way above their capacity, you're not necessarily stewarding that person well. Now, Bob's going to teach a little bit of like, I don't want to say his content, but you need to be like appropriately challenged, right? But you need a steward. It's looking at here's God, how God has truly gifted you. and I want to help you find a role or move into a role that elevates that. I don't know if that makes sense, but I kind of always feel that burden. Great questions. Yeah.
Do you ever feel like almost all of those are complicated by one key critical issue that you're always going to deal with is if someone has a lack of self and or situational awareness, that's an issue you might have to unpack it separately because you'll never get to any of those if they can't be self-aware.
Yeah, for sure. So his question is, a critical component to all of these is if someone lacks self-awareness. So we're going to get to, we're doing a whole thing on self-awareness right after lunch. But oftentimes, in order for them to become self-aware, it starts with this. This is how you get to it, which we'll get to then the how, right? How do you make someone self-aware of a chemistry issue? It's you have to lean in and have a crucial conversation. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Okay, last question, then let's keep going.
I'm the last one.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of obvious things that can lower one's capacity, things that happen in life and whatever. What are some successful things you've seen to help someone raise their capacity?
Ooh, success. So what are some successful things to help raise people's capacity? I think we'll get to the how. I'm trying not to get ahead, but I think it's giving them opportunities that are slightly above their capacity and seeing what they have. But depending on your church, you have to be okay with them failing, but not falling too far. So I would say that's for me. With that pastor that I eventually had to move, there were a lot of, here's how you're wired, here's what the role needs, here's what we need you to do. And it was over and over and over again, him not being able to actually do the things that he was needed to do. So it was still really hard for him when I actually had this isn't, right, we got to find a different role spot on the team. But he wasn't surprised per se. And he also somewhat agreed to you're right, that's just not how I'm gifted. Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to think too, the last thing on capacity is, this is also a biblical thing, where some people are, put in charge of tens, others hundreds, others thousands, others tens of thousands. And are we aware to steward our people well and help them continue to grow, but not have them, right, be above their capacity? Okay, great questions. Now the how. So hopefully we're all convinced why. We can come up with clarity on the what and how. Now, how is the difficult part? This is, at least in Minnesota, we're Minnesota nice. We sweat. You get, it's just fear kicks in, emotions kick in, but how is key to mastering these. So what I did when I was putting this together is I read that book, Crucial Conversations, for you. You're welcome. It's academic. And I actually interviewed a lot of people in my life, a lot of our staff and other people who I think do this really well. And I kind of, through that, I came up with 7 steps on how to have a crucial conversation. Again, we're a Baptist church, so I tried to come up with 3 that all started with the same letter. I did that for the what, I guess, but I had 5. So 7 steps to have a crucial conversation. 7, it's the number of perfection in the Bible. So you have a perfect conversation, you need to do these 7 things. The first is start with heart. So this is before you're even talking to the person. You have to start with heart. Specifically, aligning your heart, looking at your heart, and aligning your heart with God's heart. Because here's what's interesting. When I was studying this topic, I learned that scientific studies show that in these situations, when things kind of heat up or get crucial and emotional and people get nervous, that when our adrenaline kicks in, emotions fire up, which means more blood flows from our brain to our larger muscles. Okay, and what's fascinating is blood flows from the part of our brain that deals with all levels of reason. So think about maybe family relationships, when things heat up, pretty soon everyone's being unreasonable. And there's actually a scientific explanation for it. They are being unreasonable. That's why we have to calm down in order to think straight. Because it's almost like they write in the book, it's like we end up facing crucial conversations with the same intellectual ability as like a monkey. Because our body is gearing up to like fight a tiger, not have a conversation with a person. I thought that was fascinating. But so why is that? I love this quote from the 1800s. This one author, Ambrose Bierce, wrote, "Speak when you are angry, and you will make the best speech you will ever regret." This was me on my drive home to blow out a candle that wasn't right? That wasn't lit. And then, did you ever have one of those? And then later on, you're like, I am so sorry. I don't know why I did that. Such an idiot. So that's why you have to start with heart, because sometimes the thing, let's just say you found out they embezzled money or, right, did something that could end up on the news. Like, you're mad. Like, how dare you do that to the church? Right? So it's really important. You got to start with heart and check your heart so you can love them the way Jesus loves them. You know, that's why Jesus said, seek first his kingdom, his righteousness. He will give you everything you need. So before you even say anything, it's like you need to pause. You need to pray. You need to spend time with God. I love what Pastor Craig Rochelle from Life Church wrote in one of his books. He said, one of the best decisions we can make when facing these like high stakes dilemmas is to simply stop, take a time out, hit pause, sleep on it, think it over, and get some godly wisdom from people you trust. Right? This is the classic, write the email, then don't press send until the next day. You can reread it, maybe have someone else read it, and then still don't press send, have a conversation with them. But it's like, you got to start with heart, because when you start with heart, for me, it does two things. One, it keeps me humble, because it reminds me, like, you know what, Aaron, you're not perfect. There's probably a long list of crucial conversations people could have with you. So it keeps me humble, but it also gives me confidence. It gives me confidence because it's like, you're not perfect, but God has placed you in this role as the spiritual leader, and it is your call, your burden, your duty to steward this person well. And I'm calling you to do that. And I'm calling you to love them while you do that. You may not like them at all, but you got to love them. So get your heart right. The other thing with starting with heart is it makes me look in the mirror and say, is this really a chemistry thing? Or do I just not like them? Does my personality and their personality is it really their issue or is it my issue? Is it really a competence or a capacity thing? Or is it my insecurity? Are they actually better than me? And now I'm threatened. That happens all the time in leadership in churches. Someone rises up, the leader feels threatened, so what do? They try to get them out because they become Saul when the David is on their team. Rather than saying, wow, look at how gifted they are, let's rise them up, they try to kill them. So that's what starting with heart helps. Second, keep it private. Keep it private. So to best explain this, I'm going to give you some do's and don'ts. Do set up a one-on-one conversation, if all possible. Right? In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. You know, make it private, one-on-one. It shows honor and respect. Don't address it publicly. Man, I've heard horror stories of this happening, of leaders having a crucial conversation with someone on the team in front of the whole team. It's not always wise to do that. Like, go to them privately. Do seek counsel, but don't gossip. Whew. There is a fine line but a big difference between these two. So here's how I personally understand this. Seeking wise counsel is going to a trusted person that you know this person has a few things in mind. That this person loves you, they want what's best for you, they love the person. Sometimes you might tell them who it is, sometimes you actually don't need to do that. You just explain that, hey, this someone I'm working with, here's the problem, here's the situation, what do you think? How should I approach this? And you know they want what's best for you, and they want what's best for that person, and they want what's best for the church and your team, right? They're not just on team you, they're on team you, them, and the kingdom of God. And right, you're seeking wise counsel. And the conversation is solution-oriented. And you know it's going to stay between you and them. Gossip is when you go to somebody and you talk all about the thing, and they're only on your team, they don't really care about them, and it's not solution-oriented. Now I'm going to still steal a Bill Bush thing, what he said to me once. He was like, the way he talks about it is, are you seeking advice or are you seeking allies? And oftentimes we seek a lot of allies before we actually have it. And that's gossip. And that's not healthy. That's not okay. And that doesn't unify, that divides. So seek counsel, don't gossip. Make it timely, and don't wait too long. Maybe it's like, okay, you need to have it the next day or a couple days later. Right? If you're fired up and you're emotional and you're angry, in that moment's probably not the best time. Right? Sleep on it, take a time out, seek some counsel. But don't wait too long. I don't know about you, but I don't want anyone ever coming up to me, sitting me down and being like, Aaron, for the last 6 months, you do something that annoys the crap out of me. It's like 6 months? Because if you wait too long to address an issue, guess what? You've lost credibility. It doesn't mean you still can't or shouldn't, but you have a little less credibility. Now, there's no exact time frame, right? All of these things are situational. It takes wisdom, relational equity with the person, all of that. But timely, don't wait too long. Make sure your heart's right. Now, for 3, you want to affirm your for them. So now you're actually sitting with the person, right? You have it private, one-on-one. Maybe, right, like Dale was saying, maybe you bring another wise, trusted person with you. That's okay too. It can be a 2-on-1, especially if it's like with an attender and you bring a board member, right, because they want to destroy you. That's okay sometimes too. But the first thing you want to do when you're meeting with them is you want to affirm your for them. Okay, you want to affirm your for them. Once you kick off the conversation, you don't want to be like, so I'm meeting with you today because you're a jerk and nobody likes you. I know you think you can sing, but you can't hold a note. You're terrible. 10 people come up and say, why are they leading worship? Right? You don't want to start there. You want to make sure that that person knows you are on their team, that you want what's best for them, that you're for them, not against them, right? That you're their friend, not their enemy. So you can say things like, hey, thanks for meeting with you today. The first thing I just want to let you know, man, what you've done for this church is incredible. Like the way God has gifted you in whatever, you're affirming them. Now, I do want to say how you affirm them and how much you sit in this step depends on the relational equity you have with the person. Right? So if you don't really know them that well, if they don't really know that you are for them, you might need to really spend more time saying, like, in that space. But let's say if Dale, my boss, needs to have a crucial conversation with me, he doesn't even need to say a word. He could just look at me and we have the bro code of I know he's for me, right? So he could just get right to the thing. But because it'd be weird if he took 5 minutes to tell me all these nice things before he told me the truth. So again, it's wisdom in relational equity. Only you know that with your team and with your people. But they have to know you are for them. And then the fourth is then speak truth in love. So oversimplified, hey, you're great. I love what you do. You're, great leader. But here's the truth. Here's why I'm meeting with you. Here's a blind side. Here's a dark side. Here's, the rip. You got a problem that everyone can see. And then you want to speak the truth in love. And you don't want to soften, you don't want to soften the message, but there's a way to be aware of the delivery that you're saying. And when these don't go well, it's because we don't speak the truth well, most of the time. Now, be aware of your personality. My personality is I can live a lot more in the love and shy away from the truth. There are other personalities. Maybe you're probably married to the other personality, right? It's like truth all day, and love is the thing they need to remind themselves of, right? So just know how you're wired and know, okay, what can't I forget? We have this phrase at Eaglebrook where we say, is this a 3 or an 8? Now, what do we mean by that? It's if you're speaking the truth, let's just say it's a culture thing. Hey, just so you know, here at our church, when a meeting starts at 4, it starts at 4. It doesn't mean you get up from your desk and go to the bathroom at 4 and get in at 4:05, right? And let's say someone's late all the time. And you got to let them know, is this, on a scale from 1 to 10, is this a 3? It's well, right now it's probably a 4, right? But you got to start being on time. But maybe it's become a big deal, and they need to know this problem, okay, whatever it is, you think it's a 3, but it's really an 8. If you don't change this, it's probably going to drastically damage your credibility, trust, and maybe future here at this church. This is a big deal that you need, that's holding you back, that's becoming your lid, right? I've asked some people this question. This is in the last month. I met with some people. I'm I have a question for you. I go, do you see a limp in my leadership that's becoming my lid? Because if you see a limp in my leadership that's becoming my lid, I need to know so I can do some surgery. So here's the scalpel. Cut me up. And it was fun. No, it wasn't very fun. But, right, it's speak the truth. And then some of the feedback I got, I later followed up, and I was hey, I love that, that feedback, because I was hungry, right, to grow. And I specifically said, is this a 3 or an 8? And then he gave me the number. And it was a fantastic dialogue. It's oh, I wasn't aware of that. But speak truth in love. Don't do a turd sandwich. I got this from a book. The turd sandwich is this. You are such a good leader, and we love you, and you're so gifted, and you're so amazing, but you're terrible and nobody likes you. But you're so awesome, and we love you, right? So it's you're great. Here's something you need to get better at, but you're okay. You're good. You're great. That person leaves confused. Am I good, or do I need something I need to work on? So that's a turd sandwich, right? So a better way to think of it is you're affirming them, here's the truth, and then you come alongside them and say, but I believe in you, and the reason I'm telling this to you is because I believe you can get better, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. It might be the hardest thing you've ever had to deal with in your life, but I'm going to walk alongside you. So that's a better way to follow up. But let the meeting sit in that weight of the truth. I want to show you, I think this is on page something in your notes. It's called the feedback grid. The next page. When I first heard this, I thought it was one of the greatest things. Okay, so this isn't my original. Personally, I love this. So feedback grid. So when you think of speaking truth, I'm going to show you 4 different things. The first on the left, upper left, is positive general feedback. Jen, I think you need to flip the thing here. Positive general feedback. Okay, so this feedback is positive feedback, but it's general in nature. So maybe the pastor gives a sermon and, hey, great message. Or great job, Dale, that was amazing. Good teaching. It feels good, right? Positive general feedback is better than nothing. But it feels good, but it doesn't necessarily make people better, does it? Love the worship today. Crushed it. Thanks. It feels good, but it doesn't make you better. The other feedback, I think it's what's next, Jen? Oh, negative general is by far the worst thing we could do to people. Negative general feedback are comments like, you're just not a leader. I don't think ministry is your calling. You're not smart. People don't like you. You don't get along with anyone. Everyone thinks, I don't know, right? It's horrible, and here's why. Okay, here's why. I am convinced that there are adults 30, 40, 50, 60 years old who are still in therapy because of a negative general thing. Again, I cried at my wedding. A negative general thing someone said to them when they were in 6th grade. Nobody loves you. They live their whole life trying to live up to that thing someone said, a teacher, whatever. They're still in counseling for it. It's impacted them the rest of their life. Never do that. Never give negative general feedback. And here's why. It lasts forever. The better is on the right-hand side. This is positive specific. Hey, great sermon today. I loved it because I love the opening story you told. Man, it really connected me with you, and the way you built tension is like, oh yes, I struggle with that too. And then the way you went into like scripture and how like God had a solution to that and how I could apply it to my life, that was money. Man, hey, I loved the meeting you just led. I love the fact that you pulled the genius out of your whole team. And I love, too, how, like, that person kept trying to, and I love how you handled them with grace and truth and, didn't let them bulldoze everybody. Great job, right? It's positive and specific. When I was playing junior hockey, when I got drafted to a different team, one of the first practices, the head coach was literally standing up in the bleachers with a clipboard watching me. I wasn't nervous at all. And after the practice, he met with me and he said, hey, Aaron, I was watching you. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And he was like, here's just one of the biggest things I noticed is he said, I was a goalie, by the way. He's like, you are very good at controlling your rebounds. Now, if you don't know what that means, like when a goalie, you don't just block the puck when they shoot it at you. You want to stop it and control it. So you want to only, block it, but also put it in the corner or behind the net so it doesn't end up in front and someone slams it in, right? And I never thought I was good at controlling my rebounds. Now, he told me that, when I was playing juniors, and then I went on to play 4 years of college hockey. And I never realized this until teaching this content like 2 years ago, that the rest of my hockey career, every practice, do you know what I was thinking in my head? Aaron, you're good at controlling your rebounds. I never connected those dots. But positive, specific feedback lasted with me for a really long time. because people remember it. It makes people better. So if you're going to give feedback, come up with one specific thing at least, because what's celebrated gets replicated. And what we're really talking about here is negative specific feedback. Hey, I just want to meet with you. You know, you're such a good leader. Man, I love the way you lead your team. Here's just one thing. That, right, and that meeting didn't go well, or whatever, right? It's negative and it's specific. Hey, I love having you on the team, but here at our church, we're on time. And you're giving specific, right, negative specific feedback. You know, you can come up with examples, but that's so much better. So this has helped me a ton, specifically with positive specific. I often want to text people, crushed it. And then it takes energy and effort to say, that was so good, here's why. More time, more energy, worth it. All right, number 5, learn their story. Learn their story. So simply put, you're awesome and I love you. Here's the truth. And then quickly follow that up with, so help. The best question is, help me understand. Help me understand why. You know, I love what James, the brother of Jesus, said. Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. So follow up the truth with a question and then listen to their story. Because oftentimes what you'll find is there is a thing behind the thing, and now you have context, you have understanding, and sometimes now you can pastor them. It's like, oh, you know, you could either say, I love having you on the team, you're always late, that's not part of our culture, don't be late again, because if you're late 3 more times, this is, you know, strike 3 and you're out. Like, that's one way to approach it. Or, hey, help me understand, like, what's going on? Why are you always late to work? And then you realize, you know, their spouse, you know, is sick now, and they have to bring their kids to the, you know, or their daycare shut down, and there's things that could be the thing behind the thing. And now you know how to lead them, how to follow up, what to do with it. But we often skip this. And I think even if the thing is so bad that it's going to end with, like, removing them from leadership or, you know, employment, it's still hey, I love the impact you've made on this church. Here's the truth. We caught you stealing money. Just making something up here. Help us understand why you were doing this, and you genuinely try to listen. Just genuinely try to listen. There was share a quick story. When I was, years ago, a youth pastor, we had a boys' small group leader who was one of our best small group leaders in the whole ministry. Incredible small group leader. He had a huge group of guys, high school guys. They loved him. He was committed to them. They were committed to him. They always showed up. They were consistent. But back then, we had small group and then large group. So students would come to large group first, you know, worship message, and then sign up to join a small group, and they would come an hour early for small group. So part of being a small group leader was you sign up for the whole night, right? You lead your boys through, you know, your students through small group, and then you bring them into large group, and you worship together, and you hear the message, you talk about it. That was the commitment. Well, I learned that he would come to small group, he would lead small group, and then he would leave. He wouldn't stay the second half of the night. And eventually, guess what would happen? His students would just start to leave too. And I heard about this, and my monkey child started to rise up like that. You know, I was a young leader, like, who does he think he is? And I started with heart, actually got wise counsel, and I didn't have these steps back then. And I scheduled a meeting. In this case, we met at a Caribou, or, you know, Starbucks area, which you probably don't want to do if it's going to end up in tears with someone. But we met there, and I spent time specifically explaining how great of a leader he was. And then I spoke the truth. I was like, hey, someone told me this, and then I saw it, and, you know, you're leaving. And he was like, yep. And I go, you know, I reiterated, like, that's not acceptable, right? That's not part of the job. Help me understand, like, why do you keep doing this? And then I learned that the reason he would leave is because he would go to a different church to play drums on their worship team on Wednesday night. And then I also learned he was in med school and he was newly married. And it was like, dude, it led to, like, you're so overcommitted, helping him figure out his life. But I saw a symptom, and then I found the root of it. And it was a great conversation. Then me saying, hey, next week you better be there the entire time. This is unacceptable, right? So don't ever skip the learn their story. And I'm going to come back to that story in a second. But the number 6 is then stay calm and patient. Stay calm and patient. You can control yourself. Most of the time, if you follow these steps, it won't go like your midnight conversation thinks it'll go. Most of the time, it goes well. When you're actually face-to-face with someone, they don't go crazy on you. But sometimes they might, right? And if they go crazy on you and get, you have to stay calm and patient. I love what Proverbs says, a gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words make tempers flare. Again, one of the quotes that my dad gave me in one of these, when I was dealing with something once, is he was like, Aaron, here's one thing I've learned over the years. He said, don't ever argue with a fool, because they will drag you down to their level and then beat you up with experience. It's true, right? They want to pull you down, and then once they get you down there, they live in that stuff. Don't enter that with them. Stay calm, stay patient, and the only way you can stay calm and patient is if you start with heart, if you're prepared going into this. And then lastly, have an action plan. Have an action plan, and then document it. Okay, have an action plan and document, especially if this is a situation where you are a leader within a church or an organization. If you're having crucial conversations, make sure you write them all down. Because if you don't, and you get to the point where, like, this isn't working anymore, and you have an HR department, guess what they're going to say? Have you documented all the previous conversations? And if you haven't, you're now starting from scratch. And you got to start over again, right? So document it, but have an action plan. When I think of action plans, there are 3 ways you can approach this. The first way is you go in with an action plan. So maybe you follow all the steps and whether, maybe it's a competence thing or, a capacity, or like it's going to end with no more employment here or removal from leadership because of something. You still learn their story. You still do all the things, but you have a plan. And you want to make sure that both you and the person know exactly what you said and what the plan is. The second is you create the plan depending upon their story. So with me and that small group leader, after I heard the story, like, I knew at the end of the day, I either want him all in or all out. But 50% just is not best for the church, the students, the ministry. You're either going to be all in or all out. But because of the story, the action plan was, hey, now that I have this understanding, we love the local church. I don't want to leave that church hanging with no drummer for the rest of the year. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a week. I want you to really pray about it. And let's meet next week, same time, same place. And I want you to let me know, do you want to stay here as a small group leader, which is going to mean being 100% committed, or do you want to go lead at that church? Because if you want to do that, great, I'll pray for you. We'll send you. It'll be a parade. It'll be great, right? But you can't do both all year. We met the next week. He wanted to stay. And then it was, now how can we work together to transition to help that church too? It wasn't immediate, now you're here all the time. It was like, let's not leave that church hanging, right? But there was an action plan depending upon the story. The third action plan is you need to press pause, stop the conversation, and be like, we're done. Because if they go crazy on you and you realize this isn't going anywhere, press pause and say, hey, let's take a walk. Let's get some fresh air here. Let's get some water and we'll come back. Or let's meet again tomorrow. Or I was in a conversation once with an employee when we were regathering for COVID, and his job was requiring him to come back to work in person and do his job in person, and he didn't want to. So while we were on the phone, he said, is what you're saying is that if I don't come and do that in person, I will lose my job here at Eagle Brook? When he asked that question, it just went from me, the supervisor, to him, at communicating expectations to, hey man, that's a really specific question. Let's press pause because now I need to actually pull in my supervisor and HR, and as an organization, are we actually telling you, yes, that if you don't do this, you will no longer be employed? Like, I needed clarity on that. It's a big question. That's press pause and come back to it. But you have to have an action plan. And the last thing I'll say about this is have them repeat back to you what you've communicated to them. So at the end of the day, be like, okay, I just want to know, what are you hearing me say today? And you would be surprised at what they hear. Not only what they hear, but like how big of a deal it is. And if you do that, you're probably going to have to say, no. Like, I get why that's not what I'm saying. And then you just want to make sure there's crystal clear clarity on what you're communicating before you walk out that, and what's next before you walk out that door. Any questions? I hope this is helpful. It's very practical. Yeah.
Would you add on, or you already said like this, and start soon, like do it immediately? Most people think they gotta wait a long time to figure it out, but then they do. He said they seek allies, not advice, and commit to all-nighters where they're forming a narrative in their brain.
Yeah.
And those two things, just a one-sided narrative, just breeds negativity and that fight or flight response. So that by the time you go to have the meeting, you've already blown it up.
Totally. Yep. So yeah, like don't wait too long. Start now. And I would challenge all of you. If you're a leader, there should be at least 1, 2, or more crucial conversations you should have right now. Write it down and have it. Yeah. Can you say that louder? Ooh. Her question is, how do you have these conversations with people who aren't Christians? Exactly the same way. Honestly. Now, if it's a sin thing, right? If it's a character thing, we know, like Paul writes, we can't hold non-Christians to the same standard. So I think like how you call them out on their behavior has to look different with your approach and your wording than if they're a believer, right, you can be more bold. If they're not a believer, you have to you can't say the Bible says, God says this is a sin. They're like, I don't care. I don't care what the Bible says. So I think you just have to approach it as long as they feel your love for them, and you can communicate the damage, right, it's having on their life, whether they're a believer or not. But if it's like a competence thing, right, if you're a leader in a corporate non-Christian organization, you should still have all of those same ones. But yeah.
You mentioned affirming that you're for them, and
Yeah.
in the process maybe bringing someone else with you. I did that, and it backfired on me. Whereas that when the conversation was over, the person came to me and said, I really wish we could have had that conversation a one-on-one. So when do you kind of know
Yeah.
that maybe it should be a one-on-one?
Yeah, so it's more about bringing the other person than affirming you're for them, right? Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So he was saying, you guys all heard that, right? He brought someone with him and it backfired. Here's what I'll say. If Dale had to have a crucial conversation with me and then Dale showed up with like his boss and now it's both of them, I'd be like, what? You know, if he didn't have it with me first. Now, if it was like a big deal that ended in my employment and he showed up with HR, it's like, oh, for sure, right? But it depends on what it is. I think your first thing should be, can I have this alone? But the bringing another person with, like in Dale's example, in the destroy bucket, like if you're the senior pastor and there are attenders or board members that are, having one-on-ones at a coffee shop trying to snipe your vision, it might not hurt to bring someone else. Like, if you can have it alone, great. I think it just takes, honestly, wisdom, knowing the relational equity and all that there. But oftentimes what I'll do is I'll say, if I were them, what would I rather have? Would I rather have someone else there for all this content, or would I have it be private? Yeah. Okay, yeah.
How many, like, so most of these circumstances, obviously, we're talking about it being a crucial or critical circumstance.
Yeah.
But can you talk about Eagle Brook's rhythm as far as, like, consistent feedback, 90-day
Yeah.
reviews, like trying to hit it before it gets to a critical point throughout the years?
Yeah, so he was saying a lot of these are crucial, but what's Eagle Brook's rhythm of feedback before it gets to this? Yeah, so I think this, to me, this applies for the everyday feedback and the very crucial things. I know it's like big, crucial conversations, but generally speaking, this is how we approach the everyday feedback stuff. Eagle Brook's culture, one of our like cultural distinctives is we crave feedback. One of our staff commitments that we'll get to is make it better. And it's this constant hunger for feedback. Like, how can I make it better? Right? So after every single one of these cohorts, we want feedback, and we're always like, how can it get better? What can I do better? Like, even with teaching, like speaking, like our communicator will, and I'll talk about this more tomorrow, but they'll give a whole message on Friday or Saturday at 4 o'clock. Right afterwards, that the weekend teaching pastor and a group of people, trusted people, will go into a room, and that communicator is saying, how can I make it better for tomorrow morning? Like, give me feedback. So I think there's both when you create a culture where people are craving feedback, then it's also a lot easier to just give it. So I think that's like ingrained in our culture. But what we try to do, like with that feedback grid, is specific positive, specific negative, to help people grow and develop and get better. But yeah, it's happening all the time. Yeah.
What about, so there just are notoriously kind of hostile people, especially in churches for some reason.
Yeah.
But I was saying there's notoriously hostile people, right? So do you deal?
We don't
with,
have any hostile
You
people
don't
in our
really?
church.
Wow,
No, they're
that's.
all
Can we come to
saints.
your church? That would be amazing.
Sorry.
But so then you deal with that aspect of the
Oh,
hostility
100%.
before even like trying. Hey, every time I try to come to you for feedback, it just feels like it's hostile all the time.
Yeah.
So you would deal then with the hostility before trying
Well,
to
for
continue.
sure. I mean, to me, the hostility would be the truth that they need to hear. That'd be the specific crucial conversation. Because it's like, if you don't deal with that, then they're not going to hear any little piece of feedback. Later on today, we'll talk about like leading your team. And I have this teaching on colors and how there are certain people that, especially if they're hostile, you have to deal with them right away. Or else they become I'm assuming maybe they can become a cancer, right? Their hostility filters, and pretty soon everyone feels it, and it just ruins the culture, it ruins the team, it ruins everything. So, and you don't want to keep those people around very long. But again, everything is circumstantial and situational. That's why it can be a little hard, but. All right. One more question, and then we'll wrap it up, or are we done? All right.